I was very touched by what you said to her before, the film actually begins, which is how hard this was going to be for you and how hard it was going to be for her, and also your declaration that you were going to go jusqu'au bout, that this was going to go to the end, which is a very courageous and brave thing to do for both of you. So I found it very, very moving, and I just want to say that, and I have lots of questions, so we'll go on with those.
Okay. Thank you, Marianne. I'm actually, I'll just add that I'm struck by some similarities between this film and Bambi and Little Girl, which I think one of the things that's remarkable is the relationship that it's really clear that you're able to establish with your characters, and that each of these films is to some extent about that period of transformation. And I'd be interested to hear you reflect on that, on the role of transformation in these films, and also that there's a really clear message that comes through about dignity and the claiming of dignity by the people you're portraying, and that you so clearly convey a sense of dignity through these films. I'm interested in sort of continuing with the line of questioning that Marianne asked, and maybe picking up on some of the comments you said before the film, and thinking about, just to hear you say more what you think Thérèse's intention was. How was her inviting you to make this film a political act? I mean, at one point when she's talking about her involvement in the feminist movement, she says, "Le corps est politique," the body is political. And this is also very much about the body. So maybe we could just start by asking you to talk about how you think she saw this as a political act or political gesture, and maybe how you see it in that light. And maybe also addressing the question about transformation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was, as I said before the film had started, that for me it was a difficult moment, because I'm supposed to make a film, but when you have just a person in front of you that is dying, literally, mm-hmm. So the question is what I'm going to be able to film, mm-hmm. because each day was difficult for her. Her body was degrading days after days, and so I wasn't able to film like the whole day when I was with her. I had to wait moments where she would be able just to speak, to open her eyes, and to be alive, let's say. Mm-hmm. And so after a certain time, I realized that it was difficult, because most of the time she was sleeping, resting in her bed, and it was really the most comfortable and loving place for her. Mm-hmm. And so I've realized, because I was watching her sleeping many hours, and at a certain point I've realized that just this moment of sleeping was something very cinematic, but also something very human, because just to film someone sleeping, as someone who is an observer of that, you just think, what do she think? What are her dreams made of? This kind of things, it's like you have the person in front of you, but then you have all this inner life that is also existing at the same moment that you don't know, but you can project a lot of things into that. So after a certain time, I've decided to spend a lot of time also filming her sleeping. That was one of the beautiful moments that I shared with her, in a way. And and then there was the other moments, I would say, and there was a kind of graduation, what I could film, what I didn't want to film. Mm-hmm. because I had also my limits. Thérèse has no limits. She was ready that I could film everything. And I said to her, I won't film everything. And this is because this is something that we are doing together. You're not the only one who's going to decide what should I film and what should I not, you know? And so, and I have my personal limits, and I think a film needs some boundaries. And I didn't want, you know, to expose Thérèse in a way that I didn't like. That sometimes some filmmaker can use a very difficult situation as a pretext to perform, you know, and to use some situations, some type of characters, just to create a kind of event and to get something spectacular. I was at the opposite. I was trying to get something, to be very close to her, and really to be someone who could protect her, and just to watch someone who is learning how to die. Because the film basically is this: it's just you just watching someone who is learning how to accept and to die physically, mentally, and how is it, you know? Is it difficult? Because there is something about Thérèse that I really love, is that she's observing herself in the moment. Sometimes she's just there, but sometimes also you could see that in her way she's doing comments about what she's into. You see that she's observing herself, and I think it's a very interesting position, you know. And so for her, the film was something, of course, political, because she thinks that, especially in our society, in Europe, in America, we don't speak about the dead, and that specific moment where we're going to die, this very old age, you know, and it's kind of taboo. And so for her, just to offer her this very last moment of her life, her body, the degradation and everything, was something very political. And I understood, of course, that, but I didn't want to film the very end, for example, because what you didn't know is that one day, at the very beginning of the filming, I arrived at her apartment, and I've seen her daughter, Isabel. And so I knew her because of The Invisibles, the previous film I did with Thérèse. And so when she saw me, she said, "Sébastien, but what are you doing here?" And she saw the crew behind me, and she said, so I was very surprised myself, and I said, "Well, you don't know?" And she said, "No, what should I know?" And he said, "Well, Thérèse didn't say to you that I'm supposed to be here to film her last moment of life, her last weeks?" And she looked at me and she said, "Oh no." And she was, at that moment, she was a bit desperate, because she said to me, "You know, for so many years, I had to share my mom with everybody.
Yeah.
Since she's into politics and the militancy, I had to learn as a little girl how to share my mom with everyone, because at home there was always a lot of political meetings, and the apartment was always full of people, so the privacy was very difficult, and the kids had to learn how to live with this kind of community, and also to share their mother with others. And actually, Thérèse didn't like that the kids could call her mom. They would have to call her Thérèse. And and they thought that for the very last moments, they could be only with her. But that was impossible. For Thérèse, that was impossible. She will be faithful to her political attitude, even with her very even with the family, you know, and the kids. And so Isabel said to me, okay, I'm super pissed, but and I don't want to be into the film. And so I told her, okay, listen, I understand completely the situation, but you have to understand something. Your mother wants me to do a film, and she needs the film actually to live this moment, because I think it's difficult. But if I'm not able to film you or your brothers and sisters, then the film will tell the story of a woman who is dying alone. So you have to understand that. And in a way, she was trapped because she understood it perfectly, but she didn't want also to tell that I could tell the story of a dying mother alone, you know?
Mhm.
So at some point she said, okay, I'm going to be there for the film also. And the whole family has accepted to be into the film. But it was something not obvious for them, you know. It was a kind of negotiation, you know. And I understand, that's why I didn't want to film the very end, you know, because I said to them, this is a moment for you and your mom.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be public. The film doesn't need that, you know. So, and they thought that I think it was very important for them to leave that moment off of the camera.
Mhm.
Sorry, sometimes my English is a bit,
No, it's perfect.
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's really helpful that you say that, because I was going to ask you about the very end, and also about your choices of what you didn't film or what you didn't include, the footage you had that you didn't include, because at one point I'm seeing a lot of close-ups, which is really the, you know, sort of going into the most intimate moments and, you know, her skin and so on. And in another sense, I also felt that there was some withholding, and the withholding was done out of respect and trust somehow. So I wonder if you could share more about what you decided not to film or what you decided not to include, besides the last moments.
Well, for me, I mean, the situations were very basic actually, because she was most of the time in her apartment, and she couldn't move too much because everything was painful, and sometimes she went to the hospital for some visits, but that was it, you know. So I had a kind of very limited situation and limited space. Everything was limited because she was limited herself. And so I said to myself, okay, how could you describe that situation? How could you find the grammar with a camera, just to have this incarnation of this limitation? And so for me, the how do you say, the tripod shots was you know, this kind of very des plans sur pied, with no movement. I mean, shots with no movement.
Static, sort of static camera.
Yeah, static cameras was also just to say, okay, we are facing a woman that really can't move and has a very limited space for all these very end moments of her life. And so the close-up and the static shots was a way to make people understand that also. And I had some interview with her, but I remember that after a certain time, it was too difficult for her. Even to talk was painful. So on the last moment, I couldn't film her talking, and it was very kind of silent moments, kind of things. But I remember also when I went to start the editing, I wasn't sure that I had a film actually. And I said to my editor, okay, we're going to watch all the footage together, but I want you to be very sincere with me. If you think that the material that I have is too fragile, and if there is no film, it's not a problem. Just say it, you know. And okay, it's a part of the adventure of that film, you know. Maybe there is no film. Maybe it wasn't possible. And I remember that my editor saw everything with me, and at the end she said to me, of course there is a film, but it's going to be a bit tricky, and be patient, because we're going to have, the material is so fragmented in a way, and a bit repetitive, because the situations were repetitive, and that was also a part of the narrative. And so little by little, we have found a way just to build the narrative.
So, of the many lives of Thérèse,
Yes.
I was interested in what you chose as the sort of center of her life. Even though there are a lot of narratives about her political activism, we're seeing her through the eyes of her children primarily. And we are not, you didn't do interviews with people she worked with, and didn't discuss the Baba Yagas and the home she built. So I was wondering about those choices and how, you know, she emerges as a mother primarily through these narratives, even though they talk about her other activities.
Well, it's funny because I did one interview, one scene at the Baba Yaga's house, and but she was not living there actually. She has built this house for women, but she was not living there. She was in her apartment, and I remember that the footage was not so interesting because she was just sitting there. I don't know. It was not so interesting, and I didn't keep it. And she went there only one time, and but for me, what was important, oh no, there was something that I couldn't film. Okay, in the film you have this feeling that she's alone or with her family, and there is no friends, or maybe you see one friend.
There's one scene.
Yeah, there is one scene. But what I couldn't be able to film was, as soon as I was out of the apartment, all the friends came and seeing her. Even for the family, it was really annoying because they had very few moments of intimacy with her. I mean, the whole community of friends that Thérèse had for her whole life, and I can tell you, there was many friends. It was a permanent presence of friends talking with her, and so it was, and and then I didn't know that, you know, and actually it was quite at the very end. Isabel, her daughter, said to me, "I'm so exhausted. I mean, it's been days. We have like tons of people coming at home, and we have no moments to share with her, you know." And I said, "Really? But why you didn't say that before? You know, because it could be a part of the film." And I only had the possibility to film one of them, which was the person that you see at the very end of the film, which is it was a kind of goodbye, a farewell. Yes. So and also Thérèse, her, what do you say, her condition was going very bad very quickly. So the filming was quite short. I was assuming that she could stay longer, but she did not.
How long was the period of the filming?
Maybe 2 months.
Oh, very short.
Yeah.
I was wondering if Nora wants
yeah,
to come into the
I think,
conversation.
Nora, can you hear us? Yes. So
Absolutely.
let's see.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to bring you into the conversation, Nora, because it's thanks to you that Sébastien is here with us. You've been wanting to bring him to Colombia for a couple of years now. We got sidetracked by COVID. So thank you so much again for all your wonderful work in putting together this film festival and including these films by Sébastien. We just want to I mean, you've suggested a number of questions that we can pursue in a moment, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to share some thoughts about this film and about Sebastian's work and the importance of his work. So, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I can hear a huge echo, as if I were a giant in the auditorium. So I'm very glad to join you, Ayla, from the other side of the Atlantic. But I have one question about. So you had not access to the friends and parties, but there's actually a scene that is really important because it deals with transmission and the question of the difference of generations. It's the sequence with her granddaughter, and it seems to be in a way staged in a way, but it could be. It could have been suggested by Thérèse or by the granddaughter or by you or a mix, but it's very, very telling about the evolution of the of various visions of feminism, of political engagement, of sexual identity and identity politics linked to activism. I mean, there's a whole world between them, and at the same time, you can feel that they are very close to each other. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about this specific scene, because at the same time, the granddaughter is not so present, but it's so eloquent. So I'd like you to tell us more about this character and this scene.
Well, I remember I asked her the granddaughter of Thérèse to come by, because she's also into militancy and she's very political. And so I thought it would be very interesting to have this kind of exchange, together, because Thérèse has very clear but very strict vision of what politics is, and Pétronille also. So the confrontation was quite very interesting. I had no idea what they could say to each other, but I was just interested in to create a kind of debate between her. And what was very interesting is that Thérèse belonged to a generation of women that could go to gay identity and being gay for political reason, not only for sexual reason, but many of the women that she knew actually was, let's say, straight first in the 60s and 70s, but for very strong political reason, they have decided to become gay. And to resist to the patriarchy.
Yeah, patriarchy. Mm-hmm.
Patriarchy, and to the conformity of the society of heterosexuality, and to husbands, and to the role of the woman into the marriage, etc. And for Pétronille, her granddaughter, it was something really difficult to get, because for her, you could be you can be a feminist without the obligation to be gay. And for Thérèse, this is something weird. You have to oppose yourself totally to claim you're feminist, which goes also with sexuality, of course, and being lesbian. So yeah. And this is what you see into the film, basically. And what I like, because it was quite difficult with Thérèse to oppose herself, to different opinions. She had a kind of very strong character, and she's a kind of authoritarian person. And so Pétronille was quite brave, just to say out loud that she disagreed with her about what is to be a feminist today.
It was a really wonderful scene because it was a scene about transmission, which the whole film is, you know, transmission of a life and a generation, which you also show with the archival footage that you have, this, you know, feminism of the late 60s and 70s. But it's also about how difficult transmission really is because things change and evolve. And the granddaughter is in a very different space. So transmission on the one hand, which I think the film wants to do, and then also the resistances of younger generations. So I was wondering if you could maybe say a little more about the archival footage and how you chose it.
And just before you answer that question, I just want to say that maybe after this question, we'll give you a chance to ask questions. So be thinking about what questions you might want to ask. We have microphones on either side. I just wanted to give you a warning so you can think about what question you might want to ask.
Well, the tricky things for me was that I did already a film where Thérèse was into it. So, and I used a lot of materials there in that film, The Invisibles, and that film was quite famous in France. It had a lot of success. And so I didn't want to repeat myself and to use the same archives. So I had to find a way to talk about the past, but in a kind of different way and to use a new material. So I asked to a researcher to find unreleased material. So we found some little things. And also I went back into our personal archives and I found also new stuff. And little by little, that was possible for me to get something, I mean, to tell something, the journey into her past. But for me, the journey into her past was different because it was a way for her to go back into her past, but in a moment where she's dying. So the thing is, what do you, how can I say that in English?
En français, si vous voulez.
No, I'm going to try to say that in English. What's interesting is, you know, when you know that you're going to die very soon, what will you keep from your life? What you will remember the most? And I don't know, for me, what was obvious is that probably she will think of her little victories, political victories, this kind of, you know, important moments of her, all the battles that she has made and she was into. But I was very surprised that Thérèse said to me at the very end, you know what I remember, it's just very tiny things. And that for me was, in a way, the most important thing. It's like she didn't really remember the very important things. It was this very personal, intimate things that was relink her to life. And I was very surprised and very touched by that she has this honesty just to say, I'm not thinking about me as a political person or what I did in terms of militancy, but most of these very private moments of my life.
That's beautiful at the end.
Yes.
I thought that was one of the most beautiful parts of the film at the end when she, which also is a really nice way of getting this idea that you were watching her sleeping and wondering what she's thinking about. And there's a sort of transition from a scene of her sleeping to remembering some of those moments of, you know, rubbing her mom's back when they were outside in the cold snow, or just very, you know, daily small kind of memories like that. Many of them from her childhood, but that was just really a really moving part. And I wondered if those archival footage, for example, were those scenes of her childhood, or did you find
It's a mix.
It's a mix.
It's a mix, yeah. It's a mix. But also for me, it's like a collage. It's like we are a collage, during all our life, we are kind of, we edit ourselves all the time, and we are made of this kind of collage of fragments, And what I love about that is that Thérèse was able to really to make a selection and just to say, this is me now. Maybe if I would ask her 2 years ago, 5 years ago, she would answer differently. But at that moment, precisely, at the very end, she was this particular collage that she has made with these very tiny moments. And for me, that was very precious because we are very different. The film, it's about time also, and filming the time passing. And so it was, we're different at each moment. And I just tried to get a portrait of her at that moment and to see how she can go back into her past and what is it, when you have this this certainty to die, what remains, Is that okay? It was my English.
It's a great question.
Perfect. Yeah, really, really beautiful.
What remains?
If some of you have questions, please come up to the microphone. There's a microphone here. If you're holding your hands, if that means you have a question, please come.
Nora has a question.
Nora has a question. Okay, but Nora also understands that we also
I know
want to
that.
open
It was
up
just while the microphones were moving in the room. So it was just one thing to highlight that is important, I guess, I believe. It's that it was part of your contract, that your moral contract, that she couldn't see the outcome. She couldn't see the film, which is very special because usually in a documentary, I mean, you have, I mean, the relationship lasts after. So it's very, very brave. It was very brave in Thérèse's. Yes, she really trusted you. But again, for you, it's a very specific experience because you knew that she couldn't see the film.
Yeah, sure. And I'm not able. I mean, I will never know what she would think of the film, of course. I mean, the only thing that was for me important, that she trusted me, and probably because of what we have made together with the Invisibles, and she just wanted to keep on the journey, together and go until the end. But of course, she knew that she wouldn't be able to see the film. That's for sure. Yeah, it's a testimony in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, because I didn't actually notice that Nora had her hand up. So would any of you like to come and ask a question, please?
Testament, c'est testimony.
What?
A testament, when you're like
Testament? Yeah.
a testament. No, not testament. A testament.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
If you can get a little closer to the microphone, I don't know if you can raise it or.
Okay.
You're tall. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. So thank you so much for the film. I feel like when watching your film, it's like very melodic, very smooth, very warm, like something flowing into my heart. Also, I also feel like the scene of her sleeping very, very tranquille, very poetic, cinematic. Also, when you're explaining the process that you are making the film, I feel like your language is also very poetic. So that's something I really, really, really appreciate. So your film actually reminds me of a lot of other films, which also talks about human at the end of their life, especially the LGBTQ community, like Tout c'est bien passé, Le Train qui reste, 120 battements par minuit, Amour, or Dallas Buyers Club, an American movie. You also mentioned that somehow you try to do something different because your film is not achieving some goal of being spectacular or eventful. You try to somehow achieve something more realistic but poetic. So I'm actually wondering, because we also have so many other films that talks about human closing to their deaths, especially the LGBT community. So how do you think your films, do they share any similarities or any differences with all other films? Thank you.
Well, it's difficult because it's difficult for me to compare myself, you know, and with other films. Is I think each film is singular, and so I don't know how to answer to you if I feel. I'm sorry, I don't know. Actually, I don't understand exactly the question. It's like you want me to compare what I did with other films that are talking about the end of life?
Well, maybe I can rephrase my question. Well, you said that you try to achieve something spectacular and uneventful in your film, but do you think that apart from that, is there anything different that you particularly want to achieve, especially when talking about human at death? Sometimes there seems to be some mainstream narrative of a lot of spectacular stories and scenes. But apart from being spectacular and eventful, what do you think is special about your film?
Okay. Well, I remember when I was doing the film, I was watching other film treating the end of life. I remember there was a film of Wim Wenders called Nick's Movie about the end of life of Nicholas Ray, which was a great American film director. And I was also watching a documentary about a couple dying from AIDS, something with Silver Lake, the title. I don't remember precisely the title, but I think there was Silver Lake into the title. And it was a documentary film, very moving. And there was another one. And I remember that for me, it was very interesting just to see how all these different people has treated the subject, you know, because it was a way also to myself to make choices, you know, what I would like to show, what I didn't want to show. And the thing is, Thérèse, concretely, didn't have bloods, didn't have, you know, very spectacular moments of degradation, I would say. Everything was inside. So for me, it was easier, let's say, I don't know if the word is appropriate, but it was easier in terms of cinema to be able to film her in her degradation, because the degradation was not physically, not too violent, you know, to tell into the film. But the film could have been something much more harder visually if she would have been in a situation of despair and physically, if her body was completely damaged, you know, and you could see it concretely, you know, with sometimes you can have shit, sometimes you can have bloods, sometimes you can have, you know, very difficult moments, you know. And Thérèse was not really into this, you know, so that was the film is a bit smooth in a way, and you know, there is this kind of incarnation, you know, of the end of life. So I don't know if it's my answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really like this film.
Thank you.
Okay, another question over here.
Hello.
You might want to take your mask off,
Okay.
just to ask the question. And yes,
Can you hear me?
perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us. I watched your film last week, Bambi, and I was just really blown away by how positive it was. I think a lot of films, especially pertaining to the LGBTQ community, sometimes are just so heavy, and I kept waiting for the film to get really heavy, and it just didn't. And I came away feeling so happy and positive about the story. It's just so beautiful. If that was a goal of yours to make something particularly uplifting, and as it pertains to Thérèse as well, there's clearly a goal there with her approaching you. So I was wondering if you could just speak to your process as a documentary filmmaker with a medium that is, I'm sure, fairly unpredictable. You don't necessarily know what the outcome will be, and how you approach that when there is some type of goal surrounding the film, especially since you mentioned that you don't always know if the material will come out in the way you want it to.
Well, you know, when you do documentary, you have to be ignorant in a way, because you're not looking for something. You're just there and you live the moment. So if you predict, or I mean, if you want to control too much everything, then you will get something that you already know, and the filming will be just a confirmation of what you already know. So the thing is, you have to let it go and to let the reality comes to you. And of course, you can sometimes provoke moments because you need it, you know, because you know already that some words have been said, but you weren't in the position of filming. So you know that if you provoke a kind of discussion, you will get back probably the words that you need. So sometimes I totally agree that you have to find different strategies, you know, to get some moments. But these moments are something that you've already seen, or something that you need to that for the comprehension of the narrative. You have different type, you know, of strategies to use, you know, as a filmmaker. I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, but also for me, it's everything. It's about also the relation that you build with the person that you're filming. Everything is about that. A film is really about what you see and what is behind the camera. Also, it's a relation all the time. These people are talking to me, and they're talking to you, but through me in a way. And I was really, I remember when I did Invisibles, I was around 40, and the people I was filming were about 80, sometimes a bit more. And I remember that I had this feeling that I could be their son. And they were probably talking to me as a son, because most of them didn't have kids as gay persons. And they were at the moment of their life where it was important for them to leave a trace of their lives, you know. And so probably the way they were talking to me was more to a son than to a filmmaker or someone that they just met, you know, a few weeks ago. And that position was very important also, because the intimacy and the confession aspect, you know, of their talk was probably made because of that, you know, because of my age, of who I was at that time, and also the relation that I wanted to build with them. And they were kind of parents or grandparents to me, you know, and I was very. But all of this, you know, I can tell you this now, you know, but it was quite underneath, you know. I wasn't really aware of that, you know. It's really after the filming that I understood that the relation that I've built with them was because of them, but because of me also, and that relation has made the film, you know. And that this is every time when you do a film as but even with a feature film, the relation you will get, you know, with the comedians also will influence a lot the incarnation of each scene, you know. Because you can be very professional, you can learn your lines, you know, of the script, but a lot of things are happening because of the relation you will get, you know, with everybody actually. And the synchronicity that you're looking for is a kind of little miracle every time, you know. And sometimes you feel it, you know. Everything is a kind of synchronicity. The light, the position of the camera, the distance, the moment, everything is just there, you know. And it creates a beautiful moment, you know, a cinematic moment possible. But with Bambi, what was really helpful for me is that Bambi has written her autobiography before the film. So in a way, I think the narrative was already built in her mind. So that was for me really helpful because I had a structure that was existing before the film. And so my work was in a way to push Bambi out of the structure to get something that she couldn't control. So the film was built in between her wishes to control and to go back into this autobiography, and with my wishes to get moments where she was less in control. And the trip in Algeria, for example, was something for me that was very important because I put her in a land very emotional. And I knew that because she will be confronted to very emotional places and different moments, that she won't she's going to be less in control. Well, I was expecting this, let's say, and mainly this is what happened. And Bambi, she's an amazing woman, you know. She's so a positive character, and trans identity. Most of the time, when you see stories with transgender characters into films, sometimes they're very dark. They've been through a lot, and the film could be very pessimist. And for me, Bambi, the movie in itself, was something very important because there is something so positive about her life, about herself, that was a very important things to do, I think.
Thank you so much. Sorry, one more question, just follow up. Could you also just speak to how you build the trust with your subjects, with Bambi and Tues?
It's like in life. It's like maybe that's weird to say that, but it's like in a love relation, you know, how you met someone, how you will trust that person, how you will decide to give something from you to that person, something very intimate, something very private. It's because of that person, but it's because of also of the moment. It's because of where you are at that moment in your life. You know, it's a kind of combination, and sometimes it works, sometimes not. You know, I remember the casting is very important. Actually, you not all the person can't be filmed. You know, there is some condition for that. I remember for The Invisibles, the casting, I made a casting for 2 years actually, to really to meet all the person for the film. And I remember that I've met very wonderful persons with crazy stories, I mean, crazy lives. But I could see in their personality, in the way they were talking to me privately without camera, anything, that there was something about them that was too difficult for a film. Sometimes they were very shy. It was the way they were talking to me was too fragile, and everything was not so obvious for them. Sometimes it was a question of distance. I could see that they had no distance with themselves. Everything was frontal, but with no reflection. You know, they didn't really think of themselves and of their life, what they've been through. They had no réflexion.
Self-reflection.
Yes, self-reflection. And
Self-insight.
yeah,
also.
and so this lack of distance was a real problem. And I mean, there is many reasons sometimes where a person that you met, you have to really psychologically understand who you are in front of you, what you have in front of you, and to very Yeah, you need to understand the limit and the capacity of the person.
Great. Thank you so much.
I
Appreciate
don't know if it helps, but
No, very helpful. Thank you.
okay.
I'm really eager to ask you another question, if I may take advantage of my seat here, about Catholicism, which is obviously a really important part of her, of one of her lives, or probably several of her lives. And it was actually also through Catholicism that she first discovered Marxism. She, you know, the worker priests who were a sort of introduction for her to Marxism. She doesn't talk explicitly about her Catholicism or about her beliefs as she's approaching the end of her life, about what might follow. So, and then in some ways, the film, I mean, even the title of the film, The Lives of Thérèse, is evocative of the lives of saints. And there are, you know, some of the ways in which you film her are almost like, well, Nora talked about a kind of nature morte, when still life, when she's peeling the oranges and talking about her thoughts. So there's something about the way you filmed her that has a very sort of spiritual character to it. But I was just wondering for you what your thinking was about, you know, in any ways rendering that part of her life, or if that was, you know, if there were conversations that you had that didn't end up in the film, or, you know, to what extent do you see Catholicism or some sort of transcendent religiosity as part of her life and part of the film, and part of what you
whether she
constructed?
still believed at the end of her life, whether she
Yeah.
believed.
She was, yeah, absolutely. She was, the weird thing is she was Marxist, communist, and Catholic. And she was into faith at the very end also. Catholicism was for her something important. It was a part of her life since she was a kid. And also this story of with this communist priest was very important for her. But the thing is, there is a scene into the film where you see the 4 kids of her.
Yeah.
And what was for me fascinating is that each kid has a different, they see her mother in a different way. And you could see through the narrative of each of her kid that she was a different person actually, and she has changed from every 10 years she was a kind of different person, or even 5 or 8 years, something like that, you know. And so you can understand that through the narrative of and the confession of her kids, you know. So I think it was very interesting. And the question, so the title, you know, The Lives of Thérèse, because she has totally reinvented her life. I mean, she was made to be a bourgeoise,
Yeah.
you know, to be a housewife, middle class, very passive, and just to raise her kids. I have absolutely no problem with housewives, but women of that generation was very in a type of lives that was very, let's say, yeah, very passive, and in a way most of the women of that generation feel that they didn't really maybe accomplish probably totally what they had inside, you know. And Thérèse was in a way lucky to just wake up and to meet this priest, and then she realized that she was so wrong, and everything was absolutely not what she was looking for. And so she, in a way, it was a kind of rebirth, you know. At the middle of her life, she had this possibility to rebuild everything, but in a very radical way. And but still Catholicism, religion was a part of her life until the very end. So there was something, and for me also death, I was wondering if she had a kind of transcendence thinking of death. And this is probably the contradiction with Thérèse, because she said, no, I don't see, I mean, I don't feel something, special or whatever. Everything is so concrete for me. But on the other hand, I think she was in a kind of inner discussion with something beyond her, I guess.
It doesn't, it's interesting, it comes through in the film through your filming her more than in what she says, because what she says is, how can I leave all this? And then she says, I want to ask the doctor what it will be like. And those are very material questions, and yet the spirituality comes through more in the filming. So it's an interesting balance.
Because I knew that it was a part of her, so I had to find a way to make it understand, that there was something, a kind of transcendence.
Well, I think that we shouldn't take advantage of you too much longer and keep you here too much longer, but we'll be really happy to welcome you back in 2 days for a discussion of Little Girl. So thanks so much to all of you for joining us and for staying for this discussion. I hope you can come back on Thursday. And thank you again for such a really beautiful and moving film.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nora.